I heard you got too lit last night. Mix it purple.
What is the deal, beautiful people? It's your boy Ramon. Welcome to Lifestyles Defined Photo, where we geek out on photography all day, every day. And today I am in the building with the quite peculiar Canon 6D Mark II. This is the perfect camera to use as a case study as to what and where Canon is as a brand, and also what it means to their consumers and their fans. There's so much negative conversation around this camera and just pure confusion that it really is polarizing, and I couldn't help but seek it out to really answer some of these questions for my own. If you guys have been around for a while, you know when I review a camera, I couldn't care less about megapixel count and ISO performance. I care about using the camera and does it apply to me on my day-to-day basis? Can it get the job done? So I had to grab the 6D and I had to hit the streets. With a 24 to 104 f4L lens, can I perform my street photography tasks? Immediately, the first thing I noticed was how enjoyable of an experience I was having. We talk a lot about Micro Four Thirds and a lot of the Sony cameras. It's just a mirrorless world and how much lighter they are than DSLRs. But truth be told, sure they are lighter, but they very seldomly feel as solid in the hand. They very seldomly feel as good and comfortable to hold over long periods. Maybe a bit heavy, but it's a trade-off. It's almost like these cameras are just molded in your specific or your personal hand. That's super dope. One of the things I also found myself really enjoying was the ability, because of the articulating display, to flip the screen, keep it closed, and just not pay attention, not chimp, not look at the images I was taking. Now, most of you know I shoot mirrorless. So even if I turned off my LCD, when I'm taking a picture, the image preview still sort of comes up in my EVF or my electronical viewfinder. I don't have that here. So it was very satisfying to just think out loud to myself, okay, where's my composition going to be? Are my settings correct? Boom, get the shot. And at that point, I was relying on my experience and my confidence as who I am as a photographer to know that I got the shot. And I'm happy to say, I don't think I missed any shots when I was out and about with this guy. It was such a dope experience. I'm also loving the placement of the buttons for this guy. Man, if there's a feature on this camera, it's almost a dedicate button for it, and I like it, especially coming from the Sony world and the Micro Four Thirds world, where you got to sort of dig deep into the menus to find specific things. And yeah, of course, you can set up custom buttons and whatnot, but Canon does a great job, and I find this is something that I noticed when I reviewed the 5D Mark IV as well. I just love the decisions for dedicated buttons that Canon had. It's so dope. Everything was literally at the touch of the finger, and there was no need to dig into the menus to find anything. And then there was also that LCD panel to the right of the camera, the top right. I don't know what it is about it. I just love that thing. I guess I can look on the back of the LCD screen, but like I said before, I had that articulating display closed. So I wasn't able to really see my settings, but it was really nice to see them in that little LCD screen. So kudos to Canon. That's just smart design. There are also some really dope features here, specifically the connectivity that I have been bashing Canon on for a long time. I didn't quite understand why they just didn't have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It was so annoying. Like, what year is this that I can't pull my pictures directly off my camera to my phone? Nothing to complain about here with the 6D Mark II. Not only does it have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but there's also GPS. That's a one-up to everyone else in the industry. And GPS is extremely handy, not only because when you put it in Lightroom, it shows a map. But I don't know if you guys noticed, when you take that picture, you export it, you finish editing, and you go, you save it to your phone, whatever the case. When you load it up in Instagram already knows the location of where you were. That's super handy. Then, of course, there's the weather sealing, which is super dope, something that we may not find in the competition in terms of, yes, this is the entry level DSLR. And you don't really find weather sealing on the entry level cameras for a lot of these other guys. So that's pretty dope. Something very handy to have. Coming down to what I mentioned earlier about how polarizing this camera is in the Canon and even the camera community. These are my list of cons are kind of some of the things that lead you down that lane. I still don't know how to feel. There's so much about the camera that's dope, but there's also so much about it that I think are just poor decisions. I don't want to categorize them as poor decisions, but I just can't find any good rebuttals as to why it's not a poor decision, and maybe you guys can help me out on some of these points below. This camera is an utter and complete joke for video. Now, let me preface this by saying this camera comes with an articulating display. When I think articulating display, I don't think the ability to lay down in the grass or you don't have to lay down in the grass so you can shoot above crowds. No, I think it is an extension of the video monitor to give you some flexibility so you can see what you're filming, show other people what you're filming. I think it's like a video monitor but built into the camera, and I've seen that on so many other cameras that are geared toward video, so it's become sort of synonymous with that world. Yes, we have it here, which is dope. Not only is it an articulating screen, but it's a touch screen. This is the first on any full frame camera, so Canon is trailblazing here, and I think that's super dope. Then there's things like their dual pixel, the dual pixel autofocus? My God, it is super snappy. It is super intelligent. I've never seen anything quite like it, to be honest with you, and I quite enjoyed using it. But as you will find out later, I just deleted all my video from this because of this one particular thing that just makes me scratch my head. There's no 4K here. Now understand, I'm not saying that every camera needs to have 4K, but what I am saying is that $2,000, a full frame camera in today's world with an articulating screen and a killer video focusing system and features like electronic stabilization and HDR video, to not have 4K feels like a piss poor decision. Either it's a poor decision or Canon just wasn't ready to release this. They rushed it. And if that's the case, I still have to take points away for that. I'm not willing to subscribe the conversation that, well, it's the entry level camera and it's not really about video. Then if it's not about video, why do I have this crazy autofocusing system that you had to build into the sensor? Why do I have this crazy electronic image stabilization thing to combat the fact that it doesn't have in-body image stabilization? Why do I have HDR video? Why don't I have at least 1080 120 frames a second? I don't know. There's something that's just rubbing me the wrong way there. Then, of course, there's the no IBIS or in-body image stabilization. You know what? I was a lot less harsh on this, even though I have to note it. And a lot of the cameras I do buy all have it except for this guy. What I can say is the 24-105 that I was using had image stabilization in the lens. For me, the way to get around this is turn on the IS on the lens, put my drive mode to capture high, and just steady yourself and take 5 to 6 shots of whatever you're taking in a row. Chances are the third and fourth shot will be the sharpest, and that's something that I do on all of my cameras, even the ones with in-body stabilization. So I'm not really willing to take it away as a point, but I had to mention it. Does it matter in video? Yes, IBIS would have been much better in video, but the fact that they got this electronic image stabilization running, that worked pretty well actually. Plus there's the IS on the lens. They may not be competing on the levels of like the the Olympus or some of the Sonys, but it's pretty good. So, that is what it is. There are no dual card slots here. Not a big deal, but I gotta mention it because some people are gonna look for it. This is one of the features where I can say, hey, this is the entry level version of this camera. So I'm fine with the $2,000 version not having dual card slots. That's okay for me. This last point about dynamic range is probably the most heated conversation around this camera. And this is probably the driving factor of a lot of the angry comments I see from Canon users and why they're jumping ship and they can't take it anymore. So when editing, and this was one of my main goals when I was doing my research on the camera before I got it, when editing, I needed to see if the raw files stood up in Lightroom. And I'm happy to say they are. There's nothing, or they do, I'm sorry. There's nothing wrong with the dynamic range in this camera. This is a full frame camera. This camera performs as expected. I think it's dope. I think there's great image quality coming out of this. I have no complaints. Now, what I can tell you is I've seen a ton of videos out there comparing the 6D Mark I to this 6D Mark II. And versus the 6D Mark I, the dynamic range on this camera is just not as good. And that, my friends, is a problem. Now, you can tell me I can buy this camera. I have no problem spending my money on this camera because I'm not a Canon user. But if you currently have a 6D Mark I and you're looking to upgrade, why in the world would you spend your money to buy the newer version of the camera that has less dynamic range and less image quality? I don't know. That's dropping the ball there. But even that's situational and depends on who you're coming from, where you're coming from. But let me not spare the rod. I've seen comparisons of this 6D Mark II up against the APS-C 7Ti. And the 7Ti had better dynamic range. So there's definitely a problem here. And you know what? If we look at Fuji as an example, I'm hoping that Canon will release some balls to the wall firmware upgrade that's not only going to fix the dynamic range issue, but they're gonna add 4K, and then all of a sudden this camera is back in the winnings. It's back in the race. Overall, I enjoyed my time with this camera. Maybe I missed the EVF once or twice, but it was more of a challenging exercise not to rely on it, not to rely on the live view, and that was cool. I also enjoyed the fact that Canon finally added the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth and the GPS and really just brought the camera into the 2000s, right? So that's cool. The weather sealing, all that stuff is super dope. But the no 4K thing, you got to make that decision. Is it about video for you? If so, you can your $2,000 is best spent elsewhere. If you need those dual card slots, you got to look elsewhere. If you're really you're a pixel peeping scientist and that dynamic range thing is going to bother you, look elsewhere. But I think it's still a dope camera. May not be the best in class, but still a dope camera. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We got plenty more going on. And below you will find a link to our Facebook group where you're welcome to hop in, share your images, ask your questions, and just converse with the rest of the team. My name is Ramon, and I'm out of here. Peace. Well, I guess. And the reason we started Lifestyles Defined is because if we weren't on camera arguing about these things, the technologies, the phones, the iPhones, the Androids, the cameras, the games, we'd be on the phone arguing about it. We'd be in each other's houses arguing about it. So why not just put it in front of a camera for everyone to enjoy it the way we do? That's what Lifestyles Defined is all about. We just